Extreme weather that's battered parts of the country in the last 24 hours.
Motorists in Melbourne took their chances yesterday as rising floodwaters in the city closed roads, diverted flights and brought public transport to a standstill. While on the other extreme, baking conditions up north have left people in New South Wales and Queensland sweltering. And for more, we're joined by David Woiwod in Melbourne and Gillian Whiting in Brisbane. Good morning to you both. Now, first to you, David, how bad is the damage in Melbourne? We're seeing some pretty bad pictures this morning.
Yes, Eddie, well, the bill is still being calculated, but you did see those pictures yesterday. They were quite frightening for some people. Their houses were entirely flooded, their businesses were entirely flooded. All they had really was a broom. These are urban areas. They weren't really prepared for flooding. And even though that people were told that there was a bit of rain on the way, no one really expected to see the flooding on the scale that we did. It was quite funny, well, not funny, but amusing to see some people take their chances in urban areas in their car in floodwaters. Many people didn't think it would be a problem, and they ended up having to crawl out of their sunroof and windows and have other people come and tow them to safety. In fact, one of our own Channel 7 cameramen waded into the waist-depth water and pulled out a few cars himself as well. So there was a lot of that going on, people not really understanding the threat level. But this morning, there is a little bit of damage, but people seem to be okay and everything seems to be all right at this stage.
All right, David, that's good to hear. Now, Gillian, we were hearing that we're going to expect some rain for the Queensland coast today, but it's been sweltering up there. How are you coping?
Oh, well, Queenslanders, we cope with the heat. It's actually been all right, not overly hot, but New Year's Eve, it's going to be really warm, around 34 degrees, and humid as well, close to the coast.
Well, kind of an interesting string of events out in western Nevada. Over the last 24 hours, there have been a lot of earthquakes in one specific area close to this town of Hawthorne. You can see all those little dots there. And again, this is not too far from the border of California, but literally in the last 24 hours, we've had almost 30 earthquakes, most of them pretty small, but a couple of them have been over 5.5. Now, those are big enough, according to the USGS, to at least cause some minor damage very close to the epicenter. This is what's known as an earthquake swarm, and there is some research that shows that you get an earthquake swarm like this, it can increase the chances of a bigger earthquake happening in the near future, but it's also not a for sure thing, like it's going to happen. So I don't want to worry people or anything, but just kind of interesting to see this, and we'll see what happens there.
Climate change is being blamed for the deaths of coral in Okinawa in the south of Japan. Japan's ANN television network reports that global warming is killing coral around the southern island of Okinawa. 97% of the coral is gradually turning white and dying. Scientists say that rising water temperatures are gradually killing the coral's source of food. And they say the loss of coral in the sea will break the balance of the ecosystem.
Out now in the DRC, where flooding has caused major damage in the Congolese city of Boma. At least 50 people have been confirmed dead and thousands have been left homeless. Torrential rains have caused the Kalamu River to burst its banks, flooding 2 districts. Authorities say the search for victims is ongoing. Climate change is causing increased rainfall in parts of Central Africa, with the Congo Basin one of the worst affected areas.
Solar eclipses aren't very rare as far as cosmic events go. However, when they occur, they are only visible from a certain point on the Earth. The last total solar eclipse that happened was in March of last year and was only visible from parts of Indonesia. People in the area of Alaska saw a partial eclipse, but were far from the tiny region of land that experienced a completely blocked-out sun. But for the first time since 1979, people across the United States will witness a total solar eclipse. On August 21st, 2017, the moon will totally block out the midday sun as it passes between the Earth and the sun. NASA has even set up a countdown until the massive and rare eclipse event occurs.
Now, we want to update you on a story we've been following. Russia has opened a criminal investigation into an official in Siberia after more than 70 people died from drinking bath lotion.
They were drinking the lotion to get drunk and suffered alcohol poisoning. Consuming alcohol-laced lotion as a cheaper alternative to regular alcohol is fairly common in Russia. In this case, the product in question was contaminated with methanol, which can be lethal. Investigators have so far detained over 20 people. Meantime, Russian President Vladimir Putin has demanded better regulation of bath products.
Serious allegations are coming from the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan as he has accused the US-led coalition of supporting terrorist groups.
In the beginning, the coalition said that they were going to fight ISIS. They were even accusing us of supporting ISIS. Now they have all disappeared. On the contrary, they are supporting terrorist YPG-PYD, inclling ISIS. It's very clear. We have confirmed evidence with pictures, photos and videos.
Caleb Maupin joins us now from New York. Caleb, pretty damning stuff. Says he's got the evidence to back it all up. Just take us through this story.
Well, we don't yet have the evidence in front of us, but he does say that he has it. He has evidence of alleged U.S. support for the ISIL terrorists. Now, the biggest question seems to be what impact this will have on the coalition in the region. These statements from Erdogan certainly inflammatory, and it could have an impact on the relationship between the United States and Turkey. Now, in the past, the United States has described Turkey as a key ally in the region. Let's take a listen to what's been said by spokespersons for the U.S. State Department.
The United States as a friend and partner of Turkey.
Turkey's been a strong ally for decades.
We believe Turkey is a genuine partner in destroying ISIL.
Now, just recently, a statement was given on behalf of President Erdogan in which he accused the United States of, quote, not providing necessary support to Turkey in its fight against terrorism. He described how in the Jarablus region and other places where Turkey is battling against terrorist forces that Turkey has not received adequate support from the United States. Now, it's also important to keep in mind the context that a new format in negotiations has recently opened up. Talks are taking place between Turkey, Iran, and Russia regarding the situation in Syria and the region. The foreign ministers of the three countries have gathered to discuss the situation in Aleppo and in Syria. And recently, the spokesperson for the U.S. State Department, John Kirby, was grilled about the U.S. position regarding these new talks between the three countries. Let's take a listen to that conversation.
Mr. Kerry doesn't see it as a snub.
No, the Secretary doesn't see this as a snub at all.
Well, does he not at least feel the U.S. is being sidelined, if not excluded, from what was something the U.S. was leading on?
We are not excluded.
Right now, this leadership that you're speaking of is all past tense. Is that not true?
I would disagree.
They don't seem to want him to be involved.
Well, they can speak for who they want involved or not. I mean, we recognize that we weren't invited, that this was between Russia, Turkey, and Iran.
Now, it remains to be seen what impact today's comments will have on the continued coalition between the United States and Turkey in the region.
It is a gorgeous estate on 45 acres in Centerville called Pioneer Point. The 1920s Georgian-style house has been featured in style and travel magazines. It is a place, since 1972, that Russian diplomats have used as a dacha, or summer house.
All kinds of people live here. We ride our bikes, we walk our dogs, we see diplomat tags, we cross the street, we say hello. We can kind of tell because people speak Russian, but nobody bothers anybody. We all just kind of coexist here.
Not anymore, it appears, because now the world is learning the Russian compound is also at the center of an intensifying international spy game with the U.S. NBC News is reporting the Russians also use Pioneer Point to monitor NSA headquarters at Fort Meade and another NSA building on Kent Island. Today, as part of a series of sanctions against Russia for its alleged hacking of the U.S. during the election, President Obama ordered the compound shut down and 35 Russian diplomats out of the U.S. In a statement, the president said, quote, all Americans should be alarmed by Russia's actions.
Mr. Putin is a KGB thug, and that any interference in our elections or anything that is outside the interest of America should be met with an appropriate response.
At Pioneer Point this afternoon, U.S. government officials kept members of the media off the property as agents began to enforce the shutdown. And in response to the sanctions, President-elect Donald Trump says it's time to move on, but said he will meet with intelligence officials about this whole thing next week. Senator Ben Cardin and Congressman Elijah Cummings have called for more exhaustive investigations into the alleged Russian hack and the impact on this election. We're live in the newsroom. George Lattis, WBAL, TV 11 News.
George, thank you. Now, while Vladimir Putin responded with threats of retaliation, an official Russian embassy account went for a more sarcastic tone. The Russian embassy in the United Kingdom slammed President Obama's decision and posted a picture of a duck with the word lame written across it, referring to him as a lame duck president.
Russia will not expel U.S. diplomats over recently imposed U.S. sanctions, at least for now. Russian President Vladimir Putin said in a statement Friday that despite the unfriendly and provocative measures the U.S. has taken against the country's alleged election interference, Russia will not create any problems for U.S. diplomats or their families. Earlier this week, a U.S. government report showed two groups of hackers affiliated with Russia carried out a spear phishing campaign that compromised both the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. After the report came out, the Obama administration took action against Russia, including kicking out 35 Russian officials and sanctioning Russian intelligence agencies and officials. Putin said though Russia has the right to retaliate, it will instead make plans to restore relations based on the policies of the incoming Trump administration.
President Obama and President-elect Trump have been trading potshots over the holidays, but yesterday they spoke on the phone about the transition. The president-elect called it a very nice conversation, but hours earlier, Mr. Trump accused the Obama administration of disrespecting Israel at the UN Security Council last week. Secretary of State John Kerry then defended those actions in a wide-ranging speech that sharply criticized the longtime U.S. ally. Chip Reed is traveling with the president in Honolulu. Chip, good morning.
Well, good morning. Secretary Kerry spent more than an hour explaining the Obama administration's plan for peace in the Middle East, a plan that President-elect Trump is expected to ignore when he takes office next month.
I think his speech really speaks for itself.
Standing with boxing promoter Don King, President-elect Donald Trump took a break from meetings at his Mar-a-Lago resort Wednesday to weigh in on U.S.-Israeli relations.
When do you see the United Nations solving problems? They don't. They cause problems.
Trump's comments came after the UN Security Council recently voted to condemn Israel for continuing to build settlements in the West Bank. The resolution also condemned Palestinian violence.
The United States did, in fact, vote in accordance with our values.
In an impassioned speech, Secretary of State John Kerry said the decision to allow the vote to move forward was in line with long-standing U.S. policy.
The Israeli Prime Minister publicly supports a two-state solution, but his current coalition is the most right-wing in Israeli history.
Kerry said Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's support for settlement building has hurt the peace process.
The two-state solution is now in serious jeopardy.
Netanyahu offered a blistering response.
Israelis do not need to be lectured about the importance of peace by foreign leaders.
The Prime Minister accused Kerry of downplaying the threat posed by Palestinian violence and expressed disappointment with current U.S. policies.
Israel hopes that the outgoing Obama administration will prevent any more damage being done to Israel at the UN in its waning days.
It's improper for anybody to talk about our president the way that he did.
Former U.S. ambassador to Israel and Egypt under both Republican and Democratic presidents, Daniel Kurtzer, says Netanyahu may be emboldened by Mr. Trump's public promises to upend policy toward Israel.
The indications are that he's heading in a direction that's 180 degrees away from what every previous president has done since 1967.
I think what John Kerry was saying was very much on a global perspective of what's important for Israel, and his views on what a two-state solution is about how the world thinks that this issue and all the dilemmas that are facing Israel can be fixed.
The vote that they did at the United Nations last week was a great step, and I hope that they will follow through in order to stop the settlements in Palestine in order to get to the two-state solution.
Well, meantime, President-elect Donald Trump is criticizing the current White House administration's approach and jumped to Israel's defense, tweeting, "We cannot continue to let Israel be treated with such total disdain and disrespect. They used to have a great friend in the U.S., but not anymore. And the beginning of the end was the horrible Iran deal, and now this. Stay strong, Israel. January 20th is fast approaching."
ليش؟ خلي عايزة تسعى نفر أقل يفوضون. يعني كيف هي؟ بنخش ندرب. أنا بجامع التحسي ياكلوا يا عرب يا الله اليومنا خاشبين. فوت.
ما فيش مي، ما فيش تواليت، ما فيش ولا شيء، فهمت؟ ما فيش ولا شيء، قاعدين يكذبوا علينا بريحه خبزه هيك قد هيك وريحه ماكله ما نعرفوش عليها حلال ولا حرام يا اخويا، فهمت؟ تعبنا يا اخويا، رانا تعبنا.
More than 7,000 migrants are trapped in Serbia, bracing for the cold winter in overcrowded camps in terrible conditions. Most hail from Afghanistan, Iraq and Syria. They're forced to set up tents on the street or abandoned warehouses, living for months without basic amenities, mostly limited to a single tap of water, waiting to have their number called up for a legal passage to Hungary.
We came to Serbia and registered our names at the camp, expecting to be able to leave legally. When we got to the border, we found that there was no electricity, no water. It is very cold. The children are freezing. There is no food. We have to buy things from the supermarket, but we are running out of money. We've been here for 7 months. There is no justice.
The so-called Balkans route has been officially closed. Activists and NGOs say many shelters in the Balkans are full, but the stream of people arriving to cross the border is relentless.
According to our knowledge, there is around up to 100 arrivals per day. We're meeting meeting is supporting 30 to 50 new people per day in Belgrade and in Preševo.
Only around 20 migrants are allowed to enter Hungary each day. The rest stay behind. At this overcrowded Belgrade centre, Save the Children provides activities for boys and girls. Serbia's pledged to make 6,000 beds available, but has appealed for more help from the European Union to ease the crisis.
The U.S. Navy aircraft carrier that helped deliver the first airstrikes against ISIS is now heading back into the fight. Fox News paid a visit to the USS George H.W. Bush ahead of its deployment. Lucas Tomlinson is live for us from the Pentagon with more. Hi, Lucas.
Hi, Heather. Well, good morning. Well, right now, there are not only are there no U.S. aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf and in the Middle East, but there's no American aircraft carriers deployed anywhere else in the world. Following USS Eisenhower's and her strike groups returned today to Norfolk following a 7-month deployment striking ISIS as well as Iranian-backed forces in Yemen. USS George H.W. Bush is up next. Fox News recently flew out 40 miles off the coast of North Carolina to visit the warship and watch jets land every 60 seconds, the crew working to get that down to 40 seconds. And in addition to fighting ISIS, the ship's commanding officer says his crew will be ready to deal with a resurgent Russia or China if necessary.
While we don't have any emergent or pending conflicts with them, certainly, it is fair to say that we have divergent interests in many cases. And so we need to be prepared to understand how we will react to that if necessary.
Officials tell me they do have other jets available to make up for this carrier gap. Now, you mentioned some of the history with this ship. USS George H.W. Bush launched the first airstrikes against ISIS on August 8, 2014. Now, 2.5 years later, that warship is getting ready to return to the fight.
This is the military equivalent of spring training because once we complete this at the end of December, then we'll be going forward, and it'll be real forces that will be going flying with and against.
Times reports that police will use garbage trucks in part to help protect nearly 2 million people planning to ring in the new year in Times Square. Officers and patrol cars are already lining up in the area, and police are introducing new security measures following terror attacks overseas. Major European cities are also stepping up security after the Berlin attack. Armed officers are patrolling some streets in the UK, and Anna Warner is now in Times Square for us with an inside look at New York's massive security operation this weekend. Anna, good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, you have to imagine this spot packed with some 2 million people. It's going to be wall-to-wall people here, but police say they will have that all under control with some 7,000 New York police officers, both in uniform and civilian clothes, and a lot of other measures that they're taking this year, even more precautions.
We've enhanced our security measures.
New York City officials are adding a new layer of security this New Year's Eve, following terror attacks in Europe, where trucks were driven into crowds of people. For the first time, the NYPD is placing 65 sand trucks weighing 40 tons each in strategic locations around Times Square. They're also doubling the number of blocker vehicles.
Every desk will be filled.
Chief James Waters heads up the NYPD's Counterterrorism Bureau. What's the goal of having all of those very heavy sand trucks surrounding Times Square?
It creates a hardened perimeter, so it won't allow a vehicle to get in there and replicate the Nice attack.
The NYPD is also increasing its long gun teams at security checkpoints and using helicopters and boats to monitor the area, something the department already does daily. Do you want petite people who might potentially be thinking of doing something bad to know, hey, listen, you're going to run into some serious resistance if you even try?
I want the good people to know and have a level of confidence in the police that we're able to protect them, and I want the bad people to know, beware. New York City is not the place to try to do this.
There's no known threat to the city, but Waters says his biggest concern is what he doesn't know.
That lone actor who flies under the radar but has decided on his own, self-radicalized perhaps in his mother's basement in his pajamas, and he decides tonight's the night.